This tropical depression is about to become tropical storm and maybe even Hurricane Debby while moving through the Gulf of Mexico and then possibly again over the Atlantic Ocean. Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, even the entire East Coast on guard for this storm as it could really bring impacts anywhere with this unpredictable track. Let's get right into the details.
One Nation Weather.
Those awesome weather model maps I used right there in the intro to the video are from my sponsor, WeatherBell. Check out their free trial link right down there below this video if you want to get the same maps for yourself for free, and then you can get the subscription. Also, if you're new to the channel right here, subscriptions on YouTube, of course, are free if you want consistent, accurate, and educational updates in the future on the weather across the entire United States with tropical updates. Make sure you're subscribing to the channel down below. Most importantly here on the channel, though, is your safety. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, please drop those down below the video. Do not hesitate to reach out to me, but also make sure you're checking your latest information on weather.gov and nhc.noaa.gov, those official sources. That's your local weather service and the National Hurricane Center. Let's get right into that latest satellite imagery from our late morning here on our Saturday, August 3rd of 2024, with the Tropical Depression Force sitting right around the Cuba area. It's near Havana with its low pressure center. It's going to continue moving towards the west side of the Florida Keys, and even right now as I film this video, while this thing is sitting over the Cuban areas with some of that heaviest rainfall and the gustier winds of 30 plus miles per hour, it's the middle of our Saturday afternoon, and we're already seeing shower and thunderstorm activity influenced by this system and making its way towards the Florida Keys, especially over there, some parts of Miami, Cape Coral, up to Tampa, Port St. Lucie, areas in between. We're definitely seeing some of those flooding showers possibly already beginning to get going. This is just a precursor to what's to come, as this thing is going to not only bring more rainfall while moving north, but also strengthen in terms of those winds for mainly the west side of that Florida peninsula and then up there towards the Big Bend. Here we go towards the end of our Saturday. This is the midday advisory from the National Hurricane Center showing you that by the time we go towards the end of our Saturday, we could already have a 35 mile per hour tropical depression trying to strengthen up with some of those gusts into tropical storm force while moving past the western end of the Florida Keys. Here we go with that guidance showing us that by the time we go towards August 4th in the 7 to 8 a.m. Eastern time frame in the morning, we'll probably have a strengthening tropical storm, low-end tropical storm at the time. By the afternoon and evening, though, moving on up there towards 55, 60 miles per hour for sustained winds. Those gusts could be upwards of 65 to 70 miles per hour, so approaching Category 1 hurricane force. We're probably not going to see many hurricane force gusts at all out of this system unless it really strengthens for the exact Florida coast, even where it makes landfall. But we could certainly at least briefly see right around that Big Bend landfall location some of those gusts, or maybe even those brief sustained winds getting upwards of 70 to 80 miles per hour. That will not be too long-lived, though. What will be more long-lived and what I'm more concerned about with this storm is all that water that's just going to be moving up and falling out of the sky from south to north through Florida. From Miami all the way up to Jacksonville, some point between now as I'm filming this video and Monday, 2 to 3 to 4, even upwards of 6 to 8 inches of rain are expected out of this storm. I'll show you those totals in just a bit. There are always timestamps in the description if you want to skip ahead to a specific point in the video. But you can see by the time we go towards, this is around our Tuesday time frame in the morning, looking at a 40 mile per hour tropical storm, maybe still hanging on to that status. The more this thing stays over land, though, down the line and into the early to mid part of the week, places like Georgia and South Carolina, if it stays more inland like that arrow, we will definitely see it probably stay a tropical storm, weakening down to a tropical depression. However, we could see it try to go back on up there towards hurricane force for especially those gusts if it makes its way back on out there over the Atlantic like those right two arrows indicate. The worst case scenario is really that one moving kind of along the middle where we could see this thing skirt along the Carolina coast. This is by Thursday, still seeing this thing lingering around in the Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina vicinity. Could be strengthening up if that center of circulation stays offshore. There's lots of uncertainties with this storm, but it certainly looks like the flooding rainfall is going to be a big concern, especially the longer this sits around there off of those shorelines. Now, in terms of our current watches and warnings as of the midday time frame on our Saturday, looking ahead to the next couple of days is when these warnings really go into effect. We've got a tropical storm watch there through most of the Florida Keys. We do have right there on that far western key, though, we do have a tropical storm warning in effect. There through the Florida western part of the peninsula from Naples up to Cape Coral, up to Tampa, up to Spring Hill, we do have a tropical storm warning as well as for points in between those locations. And then a hurricane watch, meaning that we could see hurricane force sustained winds if this strengthens up just a little bit more. In the Big Bend of Florida, around Cedar Key, Horseshoe Beach, and Apalachicola, you are under that hurricane watch. Definitely tropical storm conditions can be expected the most consistently in those locations, though. We'll definitely see some tropical storm-like gusts pushing inland. It's just not really really going to be sustained to that force probably too much as it moves through parts of Florida into Georgia and the Carolinas, especially the more it lingers over land. We'll still definitely see some very breezy winds that could knock down some tree limbs or maybe even whole trees as this heads further inland, though, towards those areas. So that's something to keep in mind. In terms of keeping in mind with our peak storm surge, this is the only storm surge graphic as I film this video that's up for Florida right now. We don't have anything for Georgia, the Carolinas yet because that's remaining uncertain with exact track. As this thing remains a depression or storm just off that southwest Florida coast, we're probably just going to see a little bit of storm surge. Still, though, 1 to 3 feet above normal levels there in the Florida Keys over to the southwest tip of Florida, and then up there through Tampa Bay up to around the Indian Pass area there in the Big Bend, we could see 2 to 4, maybe even 3 to 5 feet of storm surge above normal ground levels there pushing on shore. So that's something to keep in mind here. Here we go towards the end of our Saturday, following with our GFS model exactly where this storm might be going. I think it does a great job of showing that rainfall coverage is going to expand over a lot of Florida. We've got a front in the area today, so there's already going to be some enhanced rainfall, especially there in the southwest Florida areas and the Keys. That's where the gustiest winds, 20, 30 plus miles per hour, some heavy rainfall. We'll have to be watching the flooding concerns as storms move through today, finishing out our Saturday. Going into our early Sunday morning, it is going to be a very close call for what you would call the quote-unquote eye wall moving near the Tampa area. You'll definitely be on that eastern side all the way across Florida, so we could be seeing not only heavy rainfall, but coming out of our Saturday going into our Sunday across Florida's peninsula region, we could definitely be seeing some isolated tornadoes spin up in these eastern side bands as they move from south to north following the storm. Anywhere there from the Keys on our Sunday afternoon, all the way on up there towards near Jacksonville, we'll have to be watching heading out of the afternoon into the evening Sunday for not only that heavy rainfall and the flooding concerns, but that tornado potential that could spin up in an isolated fashion out of some of those bands. This is a 65 to 70 mile per hour tropical storm that the Hurricane Center is indicating will probably make landfall around the Big Bend, maybe a low-end hurricane into our Monday morning. Look at this GFS model. It shows a very similar looking system to what you would expect out of that National Hurricane Center cone, and that's why I'm using its midday run to really show you that we'll have probably some heavy rain pushing on shore through our Monday morning from at least Tampa northward in Florida. Tallahassee could get some heavy rain. And then up there, Georgia, the Carolinas could at least see an onset of some rainfall connected to a front in the system heading out of Monday morning in towards the Monday afternoon time frame. This is a critical point right here. South Georgia, southern parts of the Carolinas, the Low Country, and North Carolina as well. We'll probably have some heavy rain around the vicinity, if not from a front late Monday, but this is where the track could really split off. We could see this thing try to move a little bit further inland before cascading back south. We could see it head all the way out there back into the ocean like the National Hurricane Center is indicating it possibly could on the Georgia or Carolina shores. That one right there, right off the South Carolina coast, that arrow is the more likely scenario, and it's probably a worst-case scenario for especially places like Charleston, where we could really see the heaviest rain for quite some time with that setup, maybe even a foot plus, and the flooding concerns really go up right there in that low-lying area. You know, you're right at sea level below it in some locations in Charleston. It is a very concerning setup for that. And that's what this GFS model shows, kind of a weakening, then re-strengthening system. Look at this. This is by the time we go towards the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday timeframe, seeing all this rain sitting around, even as far north with that front as along that North Carolina coast. This low eventually could slide back inland underneath that front as we go towards the very end of the week, so towards late Wednesday heading into Thursday and Friday. Look at how this evolves. Notice how the GFS model kind of slips it back up there into the Carolinas. So if it doesn't already stay over land for a while, it will probably make another move at land, with lots of flooding for Georgia, the Carolinas, coastlines there, and then of course we'll also have some of those gusty winds, especially the closer you go to the coast, assuming it ever went back out there into the water, because technically it could stay over land. Again, there's those uncertainties coming together. Here's that intensity guidance from tropicaltidbits.com using some of those best models that really, when you look at kind of the median of these models, you can really see where the peak intensity is likely to be. My estimated dates are down there at the bottom using those forecast hours, so use those to your advantage to kind of see when these models are showing the peaks in intensity. Makes sense that peak number 1 is right around high-end tropical storm, low-end Cat 1 strength, heading towards Sunday, going into our early Monday, because that's when it'll be likely close to that landfall in the Big Bend of Florida. Regardless of whether this is a tropical storm or a low-end hurricane, please treat it with the same level of caution. It's likely it's going to be somewhere in that 60 to 70 to 80 mile per hour threshold. Wherever it is in there, at the end of the day, that's not too much of a difference. Every mile per hour counts in many cases, but in this case, it's a tropical system. You need to be inside. If you're told to evacuate by local officials, please do that as well if that happens to come up. Notice it drops in intensity while over land Monday towards Tuesday towards Wednesday. Then most models have it regaining some intensity while sitting near the Carolina shores towards the midweek time frame. Here's that track confidence using a multi-model ensemble system here. This is from a great website there. See it down there in the bottom right side of your screen. Look at this. You see that red track? It is very likely to make a landfall right there on that Big Bend of Florida. That is a pretty set in stone thing at this point. Not Tampa, not all the way over there towards Mobile, Alabama. Somewhere in between those two spots, likely right there on that Big Bend. Notice it looks like southern and central Georgia. That's the best likelihood of a track moving through there. Then those greens kind of expand. Really, all of the lower two-thirds of the Carolinas has some level of green for moderate confidence. That means that this thing could stay further inland. It could go back out and touch the water a little bit more. That's a little bit more likely of a scenario. And again, I think that's the worst-case scenario because those most low-lying areas are closer to the coast. And the more that thing lingers right along the coastline, the more flooding we're going to have. Eventually, we're going to see this thing probably skirt up through the mid-Atlantic and northeast U.S. once it gets free of being kind of stuck along that stalled front. That is also a big concern for some of the rainfall that could occur up there. In fact, speaking of that forecast rainfall, let's see how much rain the National Weather Service is predicting. This just goes through Thursday morning, so we could see more rain push inland in the Carolinas after this, assuming it kind of makes that curl inland that I was talking about earlier. Here's some of that rainfall. Notice the western coast of Florida coming between Tallahassee and Jacksonville. All the way up there, though, from Key West up to that area. That's where we're going to have the best chance for totals, upwards of 3 to 6 inches of rain. Locally higher spots, I'm sure a few spots will get closer to a foot than not. So we'll definitely have to watch out for some of the scattered to even widespread flooding that comes from there. Other areas in Florida, at least a couple of inches of rain possible. Miami, Orlando, that includes you. Be ready for isolated flooding from that. Then look at those totals right there. Savannah, Georgia, Charleston, South Carolina, up to Myrtle Beach, Wilmington, North Carolina eventually as well. Somewhere in there where this thing sits around, there will be a foot plus of rain. Anywhere along that southern part of Georgia, the southern part of the Carolinas, please be on high alert because anywhere in there, depending on this exact track, whether it stays over land longer, moves back out over the water some, we could definitely see a pretty strong storm, some gusty winds, and that very heavy rainfall overhead for quite some time. In between all those spots, you need to be prepared because, again, the track is not exact, and I'm sure it will not go exactly right on the line that the Hurricane Center has. Here we go with some of that total precipitation according to the European model. Let's look at a model's take on this. There you go, those 3 to 6 plus inch rain totals closer to the Cape Coral area there, the far western part of the Florida Peninsula. Really seeing that heaviest rain here in the next 24 hours to 36 hours after I film this video. By the time we see this thing make landfall and go into South Georgia on our Monday, look at those heaviest rain totals. Spring Hill up to Gainesville to Jacksonville, Florida. We could certainly see that eastern side of the heaviest rainfall. 3 to 6 inches, upwards of even maybe 7 to 8 inches on the high end moving through there. Any little shift in this track could move Jacksonville out of it and move Tallahassee into it, could move Daytona Beach more into it. You know, there's little shifts that could occur. Be ready all the way through this entire area for the heaviest rainfall. But then again, these models really painting that picture, the heaviest totals somewhere there in that Georgia or Carolina coast as we go towards the early to mid part of this week. Heading into, I think, especially Tuesday, Wednesday, that could be some of the peak time frames for the flooding, and it could continue even with lighter rainfall later in the week after we already get, say, maybe a foot plus in some parts of the lower country of Georgia, the Carolinas as well. It's very unpredictable where this could go. If it stays more inland, we could have heavy totals there. And if they don't come initially, then we could see heavy totals eventually move inland from, you know, that point at the mid to the late part of the week, as I've been mentioning in this video. So there's, again, those uncertainties and little things that I'll iron out. And I'll be right here with you at One Nation Weather to give you those latest details when they do arise. I do want to point out a little bit of that longer range track, though. Here we go towards August 7th, August 8th, so Wednesday going into Thursday again, somewhere around the Carolinas to Virginia. That's probably where we'll still see most of the energy from this and our lingering front sitting around. Eventually, towards the end of this upcoming week, heading into the weekend, so about 7 days out from when I'm filming this video, that's when we could see the Mid-Atlantic get involved. Anywhere up there from North Carolina to like New York City and parts of Pennsylvania, southern New York State, we could be seeing very heavy rainfall and some flooding concerns emerge out of this, developing even higher than what was already going on with some of that frontal activity moving through. This is, again, something we'll have to track. This might go back out more over the water. It might go even further inland. But regardless, you know, anywhere east of the Appalachians, you really need to be on alert for this system over the course of the next 7 to 10 days. And I've got all the details you need on it right here. I hope you like this video. If you do, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button if you're new to the channel and want more consistent, accurate, and educational weather content in the future. My most recent update video from a couple of days ago covers everything for the rest of the country, and really it's pretty quiet overall. So my next update will probably be yet another one, mainly on that hurricane. See you then.
One Nation Weather.